From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse podcast. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, welcome back to the Dental Lighthouse podcast. Jason here, your host. And next on the show, we have Matthew from the great state of California. Matthew's got a question on quarterly meetings. So, Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Better than I deserve, as you mentioned.
Better than I deserve. In fact, my operations person, Amy, who knows me all too well and is also becoming a closet Dave Ramsey junkie. She bought me a shirt a couple weeks ago where it's just this nice sky blue and right on the front, big letters, it says better than I deserve. So I love it. So welcome to the show. Matthew, what can we help you with?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I am having a quarterly meeting. I'm trying to make sure that those happen more regularly. When I started with DSI at the beginning of the year, we did our first team outing where we formed our core values, and I haven't done anything since. After talking to you a little bit, I know that it's really important for alignment and just office culture to have regular quarterly meetings. So I'd love to kind of get a good agenda from you, how you recommend going about these and getting the team on board.
Cool. So as you well know, I love the idea of quarterly meetings. I love the idea of a yearly planning meeting, and then that gets broken down into quarterly meetings, and then that gets broken down into either weekly or biweekly, what Gino Wickman in EOS calls level 10 meetings. But that cadence has worked tremendously well for us. So in the yearly meeting, we're really just talking about vision. And, we're constantly asking ourselves, where do we see ourselves in 3 years? And the vision stuff can come from a perspective of revenue, profitability, number of employees, number of doctors, number of locations, all that stuff. When you get down to the quarterly, it gets a little bit more granular. And as you know, we like to revisit what winning looks like for our team. And in my world, the term winning has 3 specific components. There's a objective, data-based component, we'll call it the scorecard component. There's a rallying cry component, and we'll unpack here in a second what rallying cry means. And then there's the winning statement component. So basically, we try to get an idea on what winning looks like for our team. They throw out different phrases about what brings them joy and fulfillment, what makes them happy, what lights their fire, so to speak. And then we wordsmith that into a 3 or 4 or 5 sentence paragraph that we revisit very, very often at the weekly or biweekly meetings. So all of our quarterly meetings have at least that component, making sure that our objective scorecard numbers are what they should be. We're tracking what we know to be important and they're on track, the rallying cry, and then the winning statement. Other things that we have done at quarterly meetings is we would revisit the issues list. So if there's specific obstacles that we're up against, we would spend some time talking about that. Other things that we talk about at the quarterly meeting is utilizing that time to help develop even more trust and vulnerability amongst the team. Because as you know, following my rendition of Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team pyramid, I call it the winning pyramid. the foundation of that winning pyramid is trust and vulnerability. And without trust and vulnerability, nothing else matters. You won't be able to make any progress, and you won't be able to follow his progression of trust and vulnerability leading to healthy debate, which leading to commitment, which leads to peer-to-peer accountability, which ultimately leads to winning. So that's the quarterly meeting in a nutshell. Now that you kind of have that overview, do you want to talk about specific, like getting granular on any of those and how we can unpack any specific part of that to make it more tactical for you?
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. My general plan right now, based on, talks from you as well as reading Pat Lencioni's stuff myself, is to start off with the trust exercise, just kind of build that trust and vulnerability that you talked about. And then to move into the rallying cry and winning statement. I guess I'd just like to try to provide some structure for that time and maybe guide the team into or provide some direction. How do you generally go about that portion of your meeting?
Yeah, super good question. So first thing I would do is make sure the team understands why you feel a trust and vulnerability exercise is so important, and making sure that they understand how this model works. So the first thing I would do is spend 10 minutes tops familiarizing the team with the model. So I would on your screen put that model up there. Again, it's a pyramid with 5 levels. The top level is winning, the bottom level is trust and vulnerability. And you just try to make sure you communicate why it's so important to have a high level of trust and vulnerability amongst the team, because without that, then the next layer of the model, the healthy debate at team meetings, doesn't occur. Because we've all been in situations where an issue gets brought up at a team meeting and it's basically just you talking as the leader, and you don't have the rest of the team contributing. Even though they do have things they want to say, or they might even have the right answer to whatever issue you're discussing in their head, not enough trust and vulnerability has been built for them to openly speak up, and they just don't feel like it's a super safe environment. So without that trust and vulnerability component, then nothing else will happen. So that's how I would start. I would say, we're not just doing this exercise to do it. We're doing this exercise because without us constantly working on trust and vulnerability, then the next part of the model, the healthy debate part, it falls on deaf ears. So with that backdrop, I would then roll into a trust and vulnerability exercise. Now, as you know, I have 4 or 5 that I have played around with from time to time. The one that you choose is going to be directly related to how familiar your team is with each other. There's more risk with certain trust and vulnerability exercises. So if you have a team that's fairly new, or a couple new team members, then you're going to want to start with the exercise that has the least risk. If you have a team that's been together 2, 3, 4 years, you can use one of the exercises that is a little bit deeper or has a little bit more risk involved. And that's exactly what we do in our offices. The exercise that we break out is directly related to how familiar the team is with each other. So let's just assume that your team is not terribly intimate with each other. So we're going to start with one of the lower risk exercises, and the one that I continually start with from a low risk perspective. I think we call it the personal histories exercise. So basically, the leader always goes first, And this is an awesome opportunity for you to set the tone on the level of vulnerability that you expect the rest of the team to exhibit. So the personal histories trust and vulnerability exercise really involves about 4 questions. The first 3 questions are just basic facts about you. And then the fourth question is where you can open up a little bit. So you can play around with these questions, but the ones that I usually use are, what part of the country are you from? How many siblings do you have? And, where do you fall on that range? Are you the oldest? Are you the youngest? Where did you go to college or high school? And again, you have to read the room, right? If you have a bunch of people that only graduated from high school, you don't want to be saying, well, where did everyone get their master's degree? That's a good way to make people uncomfortable. And then the fourth question is kind of the money question, right? That's the one where you say, when you were younger, what is something that you personally really struggled with? And like I said in some of the presentations that I've done, this is like the bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, you're up to bat, and you can either hit a grand slam here or you could strike out, right? So if you were to say something like, well, when I was 12, 13 years old, my biggest struggle was keeping up with all the friends that I had. Like I had friends that always wanted to hang out and they always wanted to play baseball with me. And everyone was always coming by the house and knocking on the door, asking if I could come out and play. And I just had so much anxiety because I had so many friends. Like that's not how you want to answer that question, right? Because it just paints you in a very egotistical light. How I personally would answer that question is, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I really struggled with my weight. I was 25, 30 pounds overweight, which was significant for someone that young. And to the point where, and I've told this story before, but to the point where this is before email and cell phones and stuff like that, where my mom had a subscription to Time Life magazine. And on the back cover of Time Life magazine, I saw a coupon for, send in $10 to this particular PO box, and we'll send you some magic pills that will help you lose weight within 30 days. So I was like, wow, this is definitely what I need in my life right now because I'm so embarrassed with where I'm at. So I collected a bunch of allowances and found change in the sofa and sent it off. And excited for this magic elixir to show up to my house a week later or so. And sure enough, as you probably realize, nothing ever showed up. So that was devastating for me. And it kind of caused me to go into a further spiral about my weight. And that was by far the number one thing that I struggled with when I was younger. So if you can be that vulnerable with your team, if you can go first as the leader and share something like that, then I can almost assure you that the next person that goes is going to also mimic that level of trust and vulnerability when they get to that question. And only every time we've run this exercise, by the time we get to the third or fourth person, everyone starts getting teary-eyed. Everyone starts like really being empathetic for the other person because you start to see a side of these other people that you never realized existed. You start to realize, these are not coworkers. These are real people. These are people that have histories and that have real lives. And it's just amazing how once you go through that full cycle of everybody going through that exercise, you just automatically a stronger unit. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be perfect from then on out, but what I am suggesting is when everyone starts to have a little bit more clarity on how human everyone else is in the room and how we do have lots of scar tissue and brain damage from our past, it just leads to much better open conversations when we start to get into that next phase of the model, the healthy debate, and we start to discuss real issues that are affecting the health of the practice. So sorry for kind of going on a rant there, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. But does that answer your question on how you could better incorporate the trust and vulnerability exercises into your quarterly meetings?
Yeah, it does, definitely. Thanks. I'd also love to take it a step further, not to, let's just say we've established the importance of that and we've had a relatively successful trust exercise. How do you direct the maybe like the goals part of it, like establishing that winning system, the rally cry, and getting everyone to um yeah, how do you work on that with the team?
Yeah. So once you've had some level of trust and vulnerability built through that exercise, and I would encourage you to do that earlier in the meeting, then the rest of the meeting, from my experience and perspective, just seems to flow better. So, Matthew, you're using some terms that maybe some of our listeners don't really know, so we can start to unpack each of those. As far as the first of three components of winning, we talk about the objective data or a scorecard. Now, that's basically a report that we track weekly. It doesn't have a lot of KPIs on it, anywhere from 3 to 7. And we decide as a group what are the most important things that we should be measuring for the ultimate success of the practice. Now, it's our experience that it's closer to 7. And all of my offices track the same basic things. Like the first four, for example, are adjusted production, collection percentage, new patients, and let's just say those three. Let's say adjusted production, collections, and new patients. Right? Everybody tracks that, but they're important, especially if at your yearly meeting you had a goal to do X amount of dollars. You want to break that down to a weekly number. So you have to be able to track that on a weekly basis to make sure that you're hitting that goal. The other 2 or 3 or 4 metrics that I would encourage you to track on a scorecard are metrics of behavior that you're trying to encourage. What we would call leading measures. So, for example, let's assume that you want to increase your new patient number. Automatically, whenever you think, well, we need to increase our new patient number, people always go to, well, let's increase marketing, right? But what if increasing marketing isn't the solution? You have to start to dive into what the real issue is here. So if the real reason that you're not getting as many new patients as you want could be something like how new patient leads are handled at the front desk, right? So let's assume that you're averaging 10 new patient leads a day, but you're only converting on 3 of those. It wouldn't matter if you increased marketing and all of a sudden now you got 15 new patient leads. The real issue is converting that lead to a scheduled appointment. And this is where trust and vulnerability, it always comes back to trust and vulnerability. This is where trust and vulnerability comes into place. Because if you're having this conversation with your team of, we're averaging 10 new patients a week and we'd like to get to 15. So who thinks here we need to increase marketing? What do you guys feel is the reason, or how could we get from 10 to 15? I can assure you that there's a couple people that sit at your front desk, right? One of the persons answering the phone and dealing with these 10 new patient leads per day, and they're just handling the call god awful, right? They're no, we don't take your insurance. No, I can't. No, we don't do that. And they're just very curt and they're hanging up the phone, right? And you have no idea. But if someone else at the front desk, now that we've developed a little bit of vulnerability, could speak up and say, I think we need to work on scripting for prospective new patients, because what I'm hearing is a number of prospective new patients calling, but we're not able to get them to go from a lead to a scheduled appointment. And you're like, okay, well, let's unpack that a little bit. What are we struggling with there? Well, the first question patients ask are typically about insurance, or, we're booked out so far. I feel like we're losing prospective new patients because we can't get them in right away. So The solution to that problem is very, very different than increasing marketing. So anyways, to go back to my original point, those final 2 or 3 metrics on our scorecard are ones that should come from identifying a problem and trying to define a certain behavior to start occurring. So if you have tracked that for every 10 new patient leads, you have only 3 are scheduling, then if it were me, a metric on my scorecard would be lead conversion. We're currently at 30%. We'd like to see it to 60%. And once you start to track things like that, everyone is cognizant of it. And you start to tweak things in order to get that conversion rate from 30% to 60%. Another classic one is a doctor goes and takes some pretty advanced Invisalign classes, and he wants to start doing more Invisalign. Well, what we would track is not Invisalign cases started, because you don't have any control over that, but you do have control over Invisalign cases presented. So that's a leading indicator. So if your goal is to present 3 or 4 or 5 Invisalign cases per week, then everyone in the office knows that that's the goal. Everyone in the office knows that at the weekly meeting, we're going to go over the scorecard, and we really want to see that metric in green. So we use green if the goal was reached, red if it wasn't reached. So if the goal is 5, we want to see at least 5. So everyone that week is going to be looking for Invisalign cases that we can present. Now, this is all within the confines of your core values, but you'd be amazed at how many patients could benefit from Invisalign but have no idea, right? It's crowding and how it's leading to gingival inflammation. It's bite issues. Like, they had no idea that by straightening their teeth could prevent them from breaking teeth down the road, could make their teeth healthier or easier to clean. It's past the vanity component of Invisalign. So if I'm trying to do more Invisalign, then I need to present more Invisalign. So that would be a leading indicator that I would put on my weekly scorecard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks. Do you divide up each department and have them figure out these KPIs, or is this just one team, one set of KPIs? Does that make sense? Or do you do like, hey,
Yeah,
hygiene's
no, makes total
KPIs
sense.
are this, front desk, these are your KPIs, or is it just like everyone comes together and figures that out? Because like, for example, hygiene might not know how lead conversions are going, right? So yeah, how do you usually do that?
Yeah, super good question. It really just depends on the office size and how many individual meetings that you're having. So as you know from the servant leadership course, typically if you're going to be in that 8 to 12 person office person range, you're still having one meeting. Once you get north of 12 people, then you might have to break it up into a weekly front desk meeting and then a weekly clinical meeting. So if I had 15 people on my team, that would be, for me, let's say 4 or 5 of them are going to be in a weekly administrative meeting, and the rest of them are going to be in a weekly clinical meeting. I would have separate scorecards for each. I would have clinically relevant metrics for the clinical meeting, and I would have administratively relevant scorecard for the administrative meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So my team's about
Yeah.
10 people. You'd say maybe one weekly meeting with the whole team. And
Yeah.
therefore just one set of KPIs.
Yeah, 10 people, like I said, is that kind of buffer zone. So 10 people maybe for the rest of the year, but as soon as you get to say 12, 13 people, you're going to have to consider breaking it up, because you get to a point where if you have 13, 14 people in a room for a meeting, people are intimidated. They won't speak up, and you can't really get real issues resolved. So your team meetings will be more so you just basically communicating information to the team, as opposed to a collaborative discussion of how can we make this better. So a lot of it depends on team size.
Got it.
So that's the first part of winning, the objective data. The next part of winning is what we call the rallying cry. And, I could talk for a couple hours about this. I'm fairly passionate about it. But the rallying cry is basically, what's the most important thing now? Like, what is the one thing that if we were to accomplish it 3, 4, 5 months from now, we would be in a much, much better place. And it's not forgetting about the other things that are important, but it's creating just a renewed and accelerated emphasis on this one thing. And there's tons of examples of what good rallying cries could be. So you basically pick a rallying cry, and then once you pick the rallying cry, you decide the 3 or 4 or 5 things that absolutely have to happen on a weekly basis, and you discuss this at your weekly meetings to allow that rallying cry to come to fruition. So I'll just give you some fictitious examples, or well, they're not really fictitious. They're examples that we've dealt with in our office. So, for example, let's say that we're looking at our year-to-date numbers and our collection percentage is 90%. Excuse me. And we want it to be 99% or 98%. So, and that's a big issue, right? You're losing 8, 9%. And that's affecting everything. It's affecting profitability. It's affecting your ability to save money for capital expenditures. Your team has determined that the most important thing is to get collections from 90 to 99%. Perfect. So that's the goal. That's the rallying cry. We are going to kill this over the next 3 to 6 months. That's our number one goal. What specifically needs to happen on a daily and weekly basis to allow that percentage to go from 90 to 99%? Well, it's a number of things, right? And you would have to ask your team, you'd have to kind of brainstorm, why do you feel we're currently at 90%? What is falling through the cracks? What is not happening? And let's make that a point of emphasis to rectify over the next 3 to 6 months. So just some basic things could be perhaps insurance breakdowns are not accurate. You're giving co-pays to patients that are not accurate, and it's leading to outstanding balances, right? That would be an issue. Another issue would be you're not collecting at time of service, and you have to refine your system to make sure that you're doing that. Another issue could be no one has been tasked with managing AR. Wearing the revenue cycle management hat. So you have to come up with a list of duties in regards to AR, and so on and so forth. So when you meet on a weekly basis, we've decided that our rallying cry is taking collections from, and you wordsmith it, right? So the rallying cry could be like, get the money, but get the money really means going from 90 to 99% in collections. And in order to do that, in order to take on, as Jim Collins would say, this big, hairy, audacious goal, these are the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 things that need to happen on a regular basis. And at your weekly meetings, you would bring each one of those defining objectives up. You would say, okay, get the money is our rallying cry. We're going from 90 to 99%. The first thing that we've committed to is making sure that our insurance verification is accurate as possible. Is this in fact happening? And you just, again, with trust and vulnerability in the room, you kind of hear what they have to say. You go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. Another great example of a rallying cry is one that we've used in our offices from time to time is get patients to yes. So we track case acceptance on our scorecards. And if we start to see a dip in case acceptance, then it's a great opportunity for that to become the most important thing now. So getting patients to yes, we want to see case acceptance go from 30% to 40%. So what needs to happen in order for us to get from 30% to 40%? And again, the team knows. The team is very, very clear on what the answer is. It just comes down to, is there enough trust and vulnerability amongst them to speak openly? So some examples of defining objectives to get case acceptance from 30 to 40%. Stop giving patients 10 different options, right? They're just getting confused. So one defining objective would be, we're only going to give 2 options per situation, right? Another defining objective would be present all treatment in a private area. Maybe someone at the front desk says, I think it's embarrassing for these patients to have to discuss their treatment plan of full mouth extractions with a waiting room of people like, really close. All they're concerned about is getting out of the room or getting out of the office, right? So that could be a defining objective. We're going to present as much treatment as we can, either in the operatory or in a private space. Another defining objective could be multiple, like a financial menu, right? Make sure that we're all dialed in on what financial options are available to patients in order to pay for treatment. Another defining objective could be something like getting past the no. We've used that phrase at work, getting past the no. So having enough self-awareness that you can tell the patient is resistant to moving forward. So once you pick up on that, taking a step back and saying something like, Mrs. Jones, I'm picking up that you're resistant to this treatment. Totally get where you're coming from. I want to be able to handle this objection from you. Can you help me understand, are you resistant to this treatment because of fear? Are you resistant to this treatment because of the cost? Or are you resistant to this treatment because you don't perceive the need? Because if you could tell me that, we could have a better conversation about how we might be able to get past that. As opposed to when someone just says, no, I'm not interested. And you just say, okay, call us when you're ready. Right. So those could be some defining objectives to an ultimate rallying cry of getting to yes, or going from 30 to 40% from a case acceptance perspective.
Yeah, got it. That's really helpful. And do you generally kind of go in with a vision of like what you want the rallying cry to be and guide the team into that? Or is it just like open forum, have at it?
Yeah. Yeah, super good question. So I always have an idea in my mind of what I really think the team needs to work on. I will never force my idea,
Right.
but I think through enough conversation, it starts to come out. And what you'll find happening is the team will start to bring up ideas that aren't true rallying cries, but are more defining objectives. So, for example, I'll be like, okay, guys, what should our rallying cry be for the next 6 months? And someone may say, we need better handoffs from the clinical team to the front desk. Well, that's probably not a rallying cry, but it's probably a defining objective of a bigger problem. So when you start to kind of unearth that, you find that maybe the problem is office communication and just a lack of communication from department to department. So your rallying cry could be something along the lines of more optimal department communication. And one of those defining objectives to get to that rallying cry is perfect handoffs across the board, right? Doctor to hygiene, assistant to doctor, assistant to front desk, what have you. So to answer your question, Dan, I don't ever go in with the mindset, this has to be the rallying cry. I have an understanding of what I would like it to be, but I do fully trust the team to come up with something because they're in the weeds with it, right? They see some of the struggles. So I want to hear them out before we decide on anything.
Got it. Yeah, that's super helpful.
And then the final component, the winning statement. So again, people think this is a little bit too soft. I truly don't. I want the team to tell me what motivates them on a regular basis. So what would make their job awesome? What would give them a sense of joy and fulfillment with coming to work? What would make them leave at the end of the day and excited to come back the following day? And it's crazy. You would think it's the same kind of things every time, but each individual office has its own personality and yours will too. And they come up with really unique things. So for example, you're at the front of the room and you're just whiteboarding this stuff, and you just ask people to throw things out. Like, all right, so what does winning look like to you? And someone will say, winning is running on time. Perfect. Running on time. Winning is doing great clinical dentistry. Okay, perfect. Clinical dentistry. Winning is being able to depend on my teammates. Winning is getting out on time. Winning is getting paid fairly. Winning is a bonus that's achievable. Like, people are just going to start to spew things out at you, which is what you want. And then you take all of this information, and you can never, I shouldn't say you, I can never take all of this stuff and wordsmith it right away. I need to let it kind of marinate with me, but I'll usually take all of those things and I'll formulate it into a 3 or 4 or 5 sentence paragraph. And then I'll present it back to the team a couple of days later. And I'll say, okay, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. If we could do this on a regular basis, and I'll read it to them, would you say we're winning on a regular basis? And they might tweak it a little bit or what have you. But so I take that statement once I have it edited by them, and we read it at every weekly meeting. And then they'll all nod their heads. Yeah, that's what we agreed upon. That's what winning looks like. And then the next question is, what's preventing us from winning? Right. So it really gives them an opportunity to say, okay, we've agreed that this is winning. So what is preventing this from happening? And it's amazing how it leads to the development of an issues list, right? So if on this winning statement is, we routinely get out on time, right? So what is preventing us from routinely getting out on time? And again, if you have enough vulnerability, it's, well, we schedule poorly at the end of the day, or some of the assistants leave before other ones, so we need a better way to manage end of day checklists, or whatever it is. But from my perspective, it's a great segue on how you can develop an issues list based on that winning statement. And in one-on-ones that I have, like if I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with someone, say, for example, there's a little bit of gossip going on, I can go to that particular assistant and, go through our whole rubric of accountability. But really what I'm asking is, Mary, is this behavior helping us win? Is this behavior that you're exhibiting getting us closer to winning or further away from winning? And just asking that question, it kind of gives them clarity, like, okay, you're right. Like, this is not helping us in any way. This is not serving us in any way. I get what you're saying, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, that's super good.
Cool. Anything else?
That's it for now, man. As you know, I'm sure you have a lot of wisdom that I could glean from, and I have a lot of needs. So, but for now, that's great. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Great question, Matt. And I think this conversation will help a lot of people because I get asked a lot, like, hey, Jason, I got a quarterly scheduled in a couple of weeks. What should I do? Or unfortunately, I get the question of, I have a quarterly scheduled later today. What should I do? All right. Thanks for the call, brother.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jason. Appreciate it.
Talk later. Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.